Welcome to Dreadwood Stories, where today we bring you a disturbing tale of unrequited love. Penelope Hannigans Bones by Poloniumpoisoning. I always knew Penelope, but was never her friend. I wish. But from head to toe, the girl was impeccable. Great student, great in sports, great silky golden hair, clothes always perfectly ironed. I watched her from afar on the playground from the first time I saw her at 5. 10 years went by and pretty much nothing changed. I watched her. I admired her. I'm not ashamed to say I worshipped her. Penelope was always in my class, but she was a world away from me. She lived in a beautiful middle-class world, while I was me. The best day of my life was when she chose me for her football team. Well, I was the last one to be picked, and she was the captain, but we did play together on the same side. I was too tall and gawky for football. My long, clumsy legs made me slow, but our team still won with 2 goals scored by Penelope. I yearned of a life where everything was easy because such a queen was by my side. My mom was a difficult person in many ways. The only bond I had with her was that she, too, was obsessed with Penelope. "You girls were this close from being sisters," Mother told me once, in a slightly inebriated state, putting her index finger and her thumb very close together. I wasn't more than 10 years old. Sure, Brian was all ready to marry that girl, but I was this town's beauty queen back then. Although she was now too wrinkled for her 30 and whatever years, looking haggard from being overworked and with a bit of a drinking problem, I still thought she was beautiful. You could see a little of her past glory if you looked carefully. Her breath, that now smelled of cheap, overly sweet wine, was once heavenly next to a boy's ear. This was our mother and daughter time, her drowning in her regrets while I softly brushed her long hair until she fell asleep on the sofa. As I got older, I started to carefully carry her to the cheap furnished main bedroom so her back wouldn't ache and make her hangover even worse by the morning. Whenever Mother got drunk, she surrounded herself with the same mist of self-pity. I almost had a child with Brian Hannigan. I loved her dad, but I loved Brian more. Your father wasn't as handsome and was poor as... but he was older and adventurous. I should know that he would die early. Your grandmother wanted me to abort you, but I wasn't ready to let go of the last piece of him. You are exactly like him. I soon realized that it meant I was ugly. I wish I looked like Mom. Long and full auburn hair like a wood fairy, and eyes resembling 2 legs full of emeralds. The only physical trait we had in common was a peculiar birthmark on our right shoulder, shaped like Australia, a peculiar, ridiculous inheritance. I hated it and always used long-sleeve shirts, afraid people would think it was a bad tattoo, even though I was still a minor. Back then, when I was 15, we also had the same height, but I outgrew her when I was older. My mom had no friends, so I kept her drunken secrets. Like when Mr. Hannigan was shot in a robbery gone wrong, and my mom had her worst drinking spree, hysterically laughing until she cried for hours through the dawn. I was 15 and patiently held her beautiful hair all night long, flushing the toilet from time to time and cleaning the spilled floor. It was useless to ask her to stop drinking. As soon as she finished throwing up, she would chug more booze in. The sun was already shining through the cracks of our small bathroom window when she passed out for good. After cozying her up in her worn-out sheets, I only had time for a quick shower and breakfast before heading to my finals, and I was an exhausted mess at school that day. Penelope was in the long hall that led to the classroom, looking almost otherworldly in the diffused light that filtered through the beige curtains. Just the sight of her emptied my lungs of all the air for what seemed to be hours. The daughter of the poor Mr. Hannigan was being bathed by the sympathy of her peers. tearful eyes that were like beautiful crystals of ice, not daring to give up faith and openly cry yet. She withstood pain most of us would never know stoically, her satin face like the Renaissance sculpture of a fallen angel. Whenever I think of her after all these years, that's the face I see. When we were in the 10th grade and things were bad, but there was still hope, she may never have talked to me, and she only said my name once during that football match, but no one can erase the memory I have from watching her that day. That's mine alone, my treasure. I heard a handful of adults talking that day. Both the teachers and other kids' parents were confident that Penelope's father was going to make it. But, as everyone's always wrong, Mr. Hannigan died that day in the hospital. She still looked heavenly when she received the news. I know because I watched her through the principal's office blinds, her once frozen tears finally running free. When I got home, Mother was already drinking. She was a daytime waitress at an outdated mom-and-pop diner, and clearly had taken the day off. There was no lunch, so I fixed us some quick food. I never saw my mom as drunk as that time. To me, she was always like a decrepit Queen Elizabeth I, the one who made gingers fashionable, but on that fateful day I truly feared her yells. She screamed obscenities at Penelope's mother, even though we were alone on her apartment. "You stole my life, you shithead. Knowing you're suffering makes me feel delighted. I won't be happy until you lose everything." These words made my heart ache. I wanted Mother to be happy so badly. It took me long hours until I managed to calm her down and put her to bed with some Ambien. After that day, no one saw Penelope at school again. At first, we knew she was mourning her father, but as the weeks went by and she wasn't back, people started to worry. The Hannigans had always kept to themselves, so the neighbors didn't think it was unnatural when the house went silent. When Penelope's aunt decided to check on the two remaining Hannigans, she found a horrifying scene. Her niece was nowhere to be seen, and her sister was long gone. A simple investigation determined that, after her husband died, the woman refused to leave her bed and languished to death. No one knew if Penelope left before or after her mother's death. She was 15, almost 16. There was a search and a lot of missing person posters, but people just assumed that she ran away, not knowing how to deal with losing both of her parents. A lot of people just talked of her casually, like she was on a trip but would be back by next week. That's why I was surprised when the cops finally came for my mom, almost a year later. By the time she was arrested, Mother barely looked human. After her drunken rant the day Mr. Hannigan died, she only became more miserable, more emaciated, more disconnected from everything, including me. She quit her job because she didn't want to get up from the bed anymore, and her addiction finally spiraled out of control when I caught her smoking crack in our very own house. The house I was working very hard to keep since she wouldn't. You promised you would be happy if your archenemy was sad. I was sent to live with my grandmother, the one who wanted me to be aborted, and she finally accepted me. She lived in a huge house, and I was happy there. I was finally free from juggling with attending school, cleaning other people's houses, and being the full-time caretaker of a grown woman that refused to eat and constantly crapped her pants. The last time I ever saw my mother was on her trial. She looked terrible. I swear she weighed no more than 85 pounds. A witness saw her walking a poorly lit road a few days after Mr. Hannigan passed. She was arm in arm with Penelope. A lot of people knew about my mom's unhealthy obsession with the Hannigan family, so the prosecution's case was pretty flawless. She was accused of kidnapping and murdering Penelope, although that was unfair, because there wasn't strong evidence that Penelope was dead, except for the fact that she still hadn't been found alive. "Come on, Miss O'Donnell." I remember the prosecutor energetically defying my mom. She was a miss because my father and her never had time to marry. You just need to tell me where you left Penelope Hannigans Bones. Mother was given a life sentence, which she could have reduced if she revealed where she buried Penelope, but she didn't. She claimed to be innocent until the last day of her life, just a few months later. After I finished school, I asked my grandmother to give me a small shack where I could live alone. And I've been lying to you. I did talk with Penelope many, countless times. You see, on that dark night, the witness only saw a woman with an Australia-shaped mark on her shoulder. It was exceptionally hot, so the long-sleeved shirt wasn't a great option. I took Penelope home. I was overjoyed to see her interacting with me, needing me, deciding to follow me out of her own volition because she didn't know what to do with her irresponsive mother. I took her because I wanted my mother to be happy, to see Penelope's mother suffering, and because, for once, we were the same, alone in the world with a dead father, no close relatives, and a mom sunk in depression. But Mother only got worse. She didn't know of Penelope, but I doubt she knew anything about her surroundings anymore. She was useless, a dead weight, a waste of my time and effort to give her everything she needed, so she would finally show love and recognition for her ugly daughter. I was happy when she was finally accused of my crime, when she wasn't my responsibility anymore. I was happy to see her go, because she promised me she would be happy if Mr. Hannigan's widow was miserable. But she didn't get better, and all the goodness I had in me towards her shattered. After that, I snuck Penelope to my grandmother's house, then finally to my shack, where we lived happily for years. Yes, I know Penny doesn't truly love me. I know it's Stockholm Syndrome, but it still felt so good to have all her attention to myself. I never made a move. I was happy just to see her existing, but I welcomed her advances more than anything in my life, and we lived as wives the most part of our time together. Since we lived in an isolated place, I even let her go out for sunlight. We got to a point where she didn't want to leave anymore because she had nothing else but me. I know in a sense she was a prisoner, but I truly believe I freed the both of us, unconventional as my means might be. Unfortunately, my dear Penelope passed a while ago. She got sick and I just couldn't risk taking her to the hospital and being exposed. Now I'm dying too, from a more devastating illness. Every day I feel the shadow of death drawing closer, and I welcome it, because I have no business in this world without my Penny. I kept her remains as a memento, the part of her that wouldn't decay that easily anyway. Before I go, I just want to put her to rest, and allow that Penelope Hannigans Bones are finally found. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and remember to turn on notifications to be notified when we upload a new video. And have yourselves a pleasant evening.